Alright, what we're supposed to do in this video is to gather the data that is generated from these text fields, and when the user clicks on save, we gather the data that the user has entered in this text field, and then create a sales record object with the information and then insert it into the database. However, I've decided to generate the invoice number automatically in this video. So that's what we're going to do, and then on the next video we'll gather the information and then insert it into the database. Alright, so let's take a look at the source code and see how we can write a method to generate the invoice number automatically for us. I'm going to write the method in the sales.dao.java class because it's going to be some business logic. So the method is going to be declared here. It's going to be a public method and it's going to be static, so that we don't need to instantiate an instance of this class in order to invoke the method. So we are going to call this method generate invoice number. Alright, so we're going to need a connection to the database to generate that invoice number. So we will have to instantiate the database DAO. Then we'll have to import database DAO. Oops, looks like I didn't spell it correctly. Yeah, wrong spelling, capital B here, and yeah, that's it. Okay, so we didn't need to import it. Alright, so we'll open up a connection to the database using try with resources. Alright, of course, opening up a connection to the database will require us to add throws clause for java.sql exception. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is to create a statement and execute a query. So I'm not going to use prepare statement here because we are not retrieving information from the user from any form. We're just simply generating our stuff and storing it in the database. Okay, our second.create statement. Now I will use the create statement method that requires the two arguments, the result set type and the result set concurrency. Okay, so so we select this other create statement method that takes the result set type and the result set concurrency. The result set type is going to be result set the type scroll insensitive, and I have reasons for that. Let's take a look at the documentation to see what it stands for. This is the constant indicating the type for a result set object that is scrollable but generally not sensitive to changes to the data that underlies the result set. Because we want to be able to move or loop through or scroll through the result set, like going to the last or something like that, or setting the maximum rows, we should be able to do that by setting the scroll to be insensitive. Then we'll also set result set dot concur updatable, the constant indicating the concurrency mode for a result set object that may be updated. If this result set was updating while we are retrieving it, it should allow them concurrently. That's for multi-threading stuff, so we need to also enable that. Then I'll have to import java.sql.statement. Now the next thing we need to do is to set the maximum number of rows that we are going to get from the result set, because we are generating only one invoice number and we expect to get just one invoice number. So we will say st.set max rows, that's the maximum rows, and I will simply put 1 there because we expect to get only one invoice number. Alright, and finally we have to declare the result set rs to be equal to st.execute query, and we should have an SQL query string in here. So my query string is going to be select the invoice underscore number from app dot sales underscore records. Now we'll have to be retrieving the last invoice number and then use that one to generate the next invoice number, so that our invoice numbers are going to be serial. So we'll say order by invoice underscore number descending. Alright, so when we say order by invoice number descending, this will bring the last one first. That's descending. Alright, okay, so this will give us a result set of an invoice number, and which is going to be the maximum invoice, the last invoice number, which is the largest number. When we get that, we need to check whether there is a row in the result set. The reason why we need to check whether there is a row in the result set is because, for example, we don't have any invoice number now in the table, so how are we going to get the last invoice number? There is no last invoice number, so we need to check if there is actually an invoice number. So for the very first time there won't be an invoice number, so that was the if statement. And the else statement, let's handle when there won't be an invoice number, which is the first time. And since the first time we are going to run this, there won't be an invoice number, we will have to declare an invoice number ourselves. Let's call that initial number, and I would like to generate that number by doing some calculations here. Let's do a math.random, because I want the number to be random. So I'm going to say math.random, and I want it to be a large number so that it looks like a real invoice number. So I'll multiply it by 100, and I would like to add the result of that random number to 100, and I'll also like to multiply the result of that to 100,000. Alright, so let's put more brackets around here. So we multiply that by 100,000. 100,000. Oops. Yeah, that's 100,000. Okay, so we have an error here. The error is that we have incompatible types, possible OSI conversion from double to int. That's because math.random, if you take a look at the documentation, show the Java doc. If you take a look at the documentation of math.random, you will see that it returns a double. So here we go, public static double random, okay, returns a double value. So it returns a double. So so we need to typecast the value of that math.random before we do all this multiplication stuff. So let's typecast it by putting our typecast int here. Okay, so to also be sure that we're typecasting what we are having here, which is the bracket over here, and you know, this first calculation, that's what we're going to typecast. So that's it. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is to return that value. So, and of course our invoice number is going to be a string, so we need to convert an int to a string. The initial number is an int, but if you can recall how we used to convert integers to strings, you need to say string dot value of an int, and we pass in the initial number there, and we are done. However, if we actually have an existing invoice number apart from the initial one that was generated by the else statement, then we will have to get that invoice number. So I'll say int last number equals now, let me not get ahead of myself. If we say rs dot get string, the invoice number is going to be a string, so rs dot get string, then we pass in the field of the invoice number, which is invoice underscore number. Alright, now this isn't going to work because the string cannot be converted to an int, but it can with integer.parseInt. So I'm gonna cut this, then I'm gonna say integer dot parseInt, then I pass in the arrays that get string invoice number. Okay, then that will give us an int, and of course we are supposed to return a string. So what was the point? Okay, the point is that we have to get the last number and then add 1 to the last number and convert that to a string again. You can't add 1 to this string. Okay, you can't increment it by 1. Okay, it will only end up being concatenation. So we can say int new number to be equal to last number plus 1. Okay, and then we can now return. We are not going to be able to return new number, so we will have to convert it to a string. So we can say string dot value of new number. Good. Okay, however, we can still do this better. We can simply say return string dot value of last number plus 1. If new number itself is what we are going to convert, then if new number is equal to last number plus 1, then why don't we simply just say string the value of last number plus 1? It will first add plus 1 to last number and then convert it to the string representation of that. Alright, so that's it. This is the method that will generate the invoice number for us. Recall that is either we get the last invoice number, increment it by 1, or if there is no invoice number, then we initialize it by randomly generating a value for it. So I hope you found this informative. In the next video we will use this method to generate the invoice number and automatically make the invoice number to appear here so that users don't have to type in an invoice number. Of course, whenever you want to create an invoice, you don't select your invoice number yourself, you don't write it out. It's always like serially the next invoice number is the one that is higher than the previous one. Okay, so that's it. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to check out our website, and I will see you on the next video.